we go. Okay. So, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Herbalism for Beginners. I'm your host facilitator. My name is Erica, and I'm with Whole Foods Co-op in Duluth, Minnesota. If you haven't been able to attend the previous classes in this series, there have been 7 before this one, and we do now have them uploaded to our YouTube channel. So you can go back and watch those anytime. I'm going to add a link to our chat pretty soon. That's the Whole Foods Co-op YouTube channel, and the playlist is Herbalism for Beginners. I have everyone muted. Please keep yourself on mute so we don't have any background noise. But you'll have an opportunity to unmute later if you want to ask questions. And feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat at any time. And I'd like to introduce our instructor, Stacy. Stacy Quaid is a knowledgeable herbalist and a healing touch practitioner. She's taught many classes with the co-op, and we're so happy to have her here to share her knowledge with us. Welcome, Stacy, and thank you for being here.
Thanks. And welcome everybody else too. So today for our class, I actually did get out into the garden and videotaped a weed walk for us. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here in a second. And what I did was I had a helper, my helper Sarah, who's helped with some of the other things that we've done here for the class, came over and videotaped, and we walked around and talked about a handful of plants. We really didn't get a chance to talk about everyone that was out there. So hopefully we're going to have another session and record another whole segment of Weed Walk for our last class next month. And you'll be able to see the progression of the things that we're talking about today. And then hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about some more, because there's a lot out there. The next day after we did it, and I had watched the video, and I went out into the garden, and I'm like, oh, we forgot that one. We walked right by that one. So it was kind of interesting and fun. So what I'm going to do right now is share my screen and share the sound. Optimize. I was practicing a little, so hopefully I'm getting better at screen sharing. Let's see, maybe not. What happened? There we go. Welcome to the garden. Today we're going to walk around and look at plants as they're growing and help you to learn how to recognize them with more ease and identify them, so that when you're out foraging and looking for herbs for your own use at home, that you'll be able to do that with more ease. So we're just going to start walking around and see who's here. We can start right down here. Here we have Equisetum ardense. This is horsetail. Horsetail is really high in silica, and it's helpful for all connective tissue. If you look here between the joints very carefully, if we pull this apart, it's got some, let's see if I can, okay, we're just going to go ahead and, is it okay if we pick you out for demonstration purposes? You can see these little joints here. And can you see how they're stretchy inside? If you can pull on it, and there's like a little elasticy sort of feel to the fiber, and that's one of the doctrines of signatures, is that helps us with our joints and our connective tissue. So I use horsetail in a lot of my topicals that are for musculoskeletal issues, and I also use it in some of my skin topicals, because it helps with the connective tissue underneath the skin to keep you nice and plumped up and looking young and vital. Horsetail is also used internally to support your mucous membranes, because that's connective tissue too. And so it's a really good herb for sinus conditions. It helps to clear out congestion and dry up and tonify inside of your sinuses. It's got a tubular impact based on how it grows and where it grows. Horsetail grows in places that are balancing the water. They live kind of in the dry water, dry dirt, like loose sandy soil that has a watery component. So you'll often find it along the edges of a pond or places like that. So you can think about how that's balancing the water in your body. And because of that tubular component, it's also good for if you're getting plugged up down into your eustachian tubes. That is a good place for this to also be effective. When you're using horsetail internally, especially arvense, you want to make sure that you strain it really well through a coffee filter. Because it is so high in silica, those little crystals can be irritating to some people's tissues. And when you pick this, when you're picking the arvense, you pick it when it's reaching up to the sky, when the arms are up. It's happy, 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 not happy, don't pick me. So once these little arms start drooping down, you don't want to use that as your medicine anymore. So right next door to horsetail, we have some yarrow growing here. Can you see these little feathery? We've got some bigger yarrow down the row here. Let's look at this bigger stuff. Achillea millifolium, many leaves. That's what that name means. If you look closely, you can see each one of these little leaf stems is cut right to the center shaft. If you look even closer, each one of the little leaflets coming off that leaflet are also cut right down to the very center of that vein. And if you put this under a microscope or had one of those jeweler's lenses that you can get for when you're out foraging and looking at things up close, you would see that each one of those little leaflets is also cut right down to the center. So using our doctrine of signatures, we can deduce that perhaps yarrow might be good for cuts. And it's good for cuts, like deep cuts. This has saved the lives of many people in the woods by stopping bleeding. Yarrow is, Matthew Wood calls yarrow the master of the blood. And yarrow is a blood balancer. It's sort of amphoteric. And so if the blood needs help to stop bleeding so much, it can do that. And it can also give blood that needs a boost to be more effective and bleed more. It does that as well. So it's very effective in those two ways for helping balance blood. The way that you use it topically is you can just take a piece and chew it up. It got kind of a bitter taste. And if you had a cut, you just put it on there. So if you had a big cut, you'd want to take a big bunch of it, and you might have to chop it up and make more of a infusion and use the herb like a poultice instead of trying to chew up big handfuls of yarrow, because that would really dry you out after a bit. Yarrow is also a bitter nervine, so it's used to help stimulate circulation and flow. So it can be helpful if we're trying to move a fever. You can make tea out of it. Hot yarrow tea will help circulation and help you to sweat. It is bitter, so it can be used as a digestive herb to stimulate gastric juices, and also to help with any kind of stomach bug or critter that might be in there, because it is got some antiseptic and analgesic properties. It also is antiseptic, analgesic, and antimicrobial. So it's one of the staple herbs in just about every herbalist's cupboard. So get familiar with yarrow. When this is grown up, you can see the flowers are starting here. These are going to have white little flat umbels of flowers growing across the top in a bunch. So, let's see. Of course, we always want to have chives in our garden because they're pretty and the bees love them and they're tasty. And you can, I like to, the chives kind of span the gap of time between when typically in a typical season when the leeks are growing. So the chives come up and you get some free onions for a while, then you can go out and pick your leeks, and that gets you to when you can actually get the onions out of your garden. So you never have to worry about running out of onions, buying them in the grocery store. So, except for this year, the leeks are already done and the chives are just barely even opening. So it's been a funny year. Over here we have some wild geranium. This is going to have a pinkish purpley flower on it. Wild geranium, there's several different kinds. This one's growing actually quite tall. A lot of times it'll be lower to the ground, and it's called crane's bell. It is a kidney medicine. It helps with drying up, tonifying, and it's very astringent. So it works good for the urinary tract for things like infections or toning things up. If someone's leaning towards a prolapse in that area, it can help to tonify tissues and strengthen things. Another great tonifier I'm seeing over here, one that this is Lady's Mantle. Look at how cool this is, how it's balancing these fluids. Lady's Mantle is got some very specific uses for the female reproductive system, and it's very tonifying and helpful and calming to our uterus and those tissues that support our reproductive system. It's often used in blends with raspberry leaf and other tonifying herbs that are nutritious to help women stay healthy, but it's not just only for women. It's got some of those same qualities are helpful for men's reproductive systems as well. Lady's Mantle can be used topically as an astringent, makes a great face wash. So you can tighten up your pores on your skin. It makes a good eye rinse. It is good for topically, like using if there's a weepy wound, a pussy wound, you could mix Lady's Mantle with the yarrow and maybe some plantain and make yourself a nice infusion that you could put on as, as a poultice, or just wash the area with it. It's going to help that superficial wound healing to dry things up and clear up any infection. So, what else we got over here? Did we talk about goldenrod yet? No, that was on our first attempt at video. This is our, third try? Let's see. This is not goldenrod. That is a cousin. Let's go over here where we found the goldenrod at first. Here we are. So, Solidago canadensis. And there's, I want to say there's like 12 different species of goldenrod. 7 or 12, something like that. So, and they're all interchangeable. And they all look similar in their flower that comes, but the leaves can be a little more full or a little like more spread out. Like there's a goldenrod that grows in the woods around here that's not quite as pointy and full. So you pick the leaves before it flowers. You can make a nice tea out of the flowering tops as well. And you can use goldenrod for helping with sneezy, runny, drippy. So any kind of head sinus issues that have that component to the fluid balancing, whether it's soggy boggy and there's just no place for that fluid to disperse to anymore, this will help to dry out and tone up so that those tissues can support more fluid and diffuse it out. So it's specific to allergies with cat dander. Pets, horses, and bunnies seem to have dander that irritates people, and goldenrod is a great ally for that kind of an allergy response. You can make tea out of it, or I tincture it. I actually tincture it and I pair it oftentimes with the horsetail. And those two together make a great tincture that you can take a few drops of and have those symptoms be relieved fairly quickly. So it's a good one. And I use that a lot in the springtime when people are calling me for their stinging nettles, for their seasonal allergies. They will often get that horsetail and goldenrod mix as well. So they're supporting their foundational immune response with the nettles. And then helping with the symptom removal with the horsetail and the goldenrod. So we should probably go back and look at the nettles. And on our way, well, these are hops. So many people on the way. So this top vine was part of one that we transplanted from a different property that we used to have. And I don't know these particular species or the genus of it because it was already growing there when we had that other property, but it was all along this, like probably 20 feet of fence, just thick and huge. So this has only been here for 2 years, and it's, you know, if hops likes where it's growing, you will have plenty of hops. So you can see how it wants to grow out here. It kind of sends out runners, and that's how it starts to vine along. Something. So this is going to get a really fluffy, white, sticky flower on it that hangs down. And when the hops are sticky, that's when you want to pick them. They have a resin on them, and that's the medicine. So. And people know, associate hops with like beer and brewing. And many people don't know that that was something that was kind of a second-hand thing that happened with the hops. And the reason that is now in like the brewing process is because they used to use the hops to preserve the beer that they would make when it was going on the big sailing ships to go across the ocean, because it would keep the beer from spoiling. And so that was the first reasoning behind having the hops in there. Prior to that, hops were used more as a household medicine for things like nervous conditions. Hops is very sedating, so it's a good sleep remedy, but it has some side effects because it has sort of a hangover effect. And your body gets some tolerance to it after a while, and so you kind of end up having to take more and more. It's also a estrogen agonist, so it starts to impact your hormones, and it can help keep estrogen elevated. And sometimes that will show up, you know, if you know someone that really drinks a lot of beer, how like men can sort of get like man boobs and big soft bellies, and women have that tendency to get that big soft abdomen from drinking, you know, beers, and that's one of the reasons why, because it's not just the calories and the carbohydrates, it's impacting your hormones on a different level. So hops was actually used to help with lactation, and it's also a really good digestive bitter because hops are bitter. So it's another way that they've been used over time, and not just in making beer. So, and if you go this way, you get through the motherwort patch. Be careful if you put motherwort in your garden. It is a mint family plant, and I honestly have to dig this patch out every year because it spreads like crazy. Cardiaca, Leonardus cardiaca. Here's that classic mint plant signature square stem. Very square stem. Very bitter. The clue is in the name, cardiaca. Motherwort is for our cardiovascular system. It's also a nervine extraordinaire. It works to help calm the heart and as a result calm the person. It's useful when someone's having anxiety that's causing palpitations, and that kind of palpitations and anxiety that our body gets in when we're in menopause or perimenopause, and we're having hot flashes and the body just gets flushed and the heart starts going and waking up with night sweats. Motherwort can be a very useful herb for some people when they're going through that condition. This will get a big purple kind of almost prickly flower. It gets a little prickly as it gets as it matures. So we pick it right now before it gets too prickly and tough, and it's great dried as a tea. It's a really nice tincture to have. Can make it into a glycerite. Some doesn't want alcohol. So very useful. You can see that this is just kind of growing freely on the side. You can see some plantain in here. I think everybody knows plantain. That one's looking a little rough. Plantain is our herbal drying agent. We remember Plantago major, that's this one. There's a narrow leaf plantain as well. Both work the same way for drying out infection, pus, insect bites, things like that. And the best way to use it is just pick a leaf and chew it up like we did with the yarrow and put it on that mosquito bite or that bee sting, and in just minutes that will be soothed and feel better. So plantain is very mucilaginous, but it's also tonifying. So again, it can help balance mucous membranes, and you can use it internally. It's used in a lot of ulcer formulas because it can help coat, but it can also help heal up that tissue. See anything that you have questions about? Oh, we've got chamomile up here. We're never going to make it to the nettles. This is German chamomile. This just is a volunteer. You'll see this oftentimes just growing along the side of the road in ditches and things like that. It gets really tall, and it gets this beautiful, tiny, daisy-like looking little flower on it. And you use the whole top parts. The stem gets very tough when it gets fully matured and the flowers come out. So normally I'll take just like the top tenderest greens and the flowers when I go to save them. And this one I almost exclusively just dry and use as a dried herb for teas, and topically it's a great skin healer, a wound healer. But this is one of the safest plants for just about anybody to try, and it's safe for little people, it's safe for elders. The only time that someone could have an issue with it is if they have an allergy. And I have met several people over the years that are very allergic to chamomile. So if you're sharing for the first time any herbs with anybody, you want to ask questions around that kind of thing. before you give them an unfamiliar tea or a remedy that you think might be helpful to them. So that's an important thing to always remember. So, yeah, chamomile. All right. Well, can't go by this big lovely dock without saying hello. So we have, this is a yellow dock plant. This is going to get a big stem up the middle with many seed heads. And in the fall, when it's dried and in the field, you'll see these really dark brown clumps sticking up in the field. And we used to call it Indian tobacco when I was growing up in, not PC anymore, but it actually does look like a dried tobacco plants out in the middle of the field. But with the part that you can do is you can eat the leaves in the spring. These are a little tough right now, but they make a good steamed green. But then we use the root. We use the root as the medicine. Yellow dock root is used for helping with liver and gallbladder issues of digestion that need stimulating. And so depending on the person, you want to ask questions around how much do they need to be stimulating, because if someone's having an overactive gallbladder, you don't want to be giving them something that's going to stimulate that more. Most people need help there, and yellow dock is one of the things that I put into my cleansing tea formulas that's often paired with burdock root and dandelion for helping to get the liver and the gut working more efficiently and get things more active and help the body to process and metabolize better. Yellow dock is also one that I put in my digestive bitters formula because it can really get things moving and help with that whole digestive process. It is very bitter, but it's a really good, deep, rooty, bitter taste. So, all right, I think we have to go back around to the other side. So, do you want to stop that for a sec? Okay, how are we doing so far? Do you have any questions about those first group of plants? Because then I have a few other shorter. We do eventually get to the nettles, but a little shorter snippets to show you. So let's start with that. And
We do have a few questions in the chat if we want to start with those.
For some reason, I'm not seeing the chat pop up here.
I can read them to you if you'd like.
Sure.
Margaret asks, how do you make use of the herbs? I'm new at planting some new herbs in New Jersey.
Okay. Well, I gave a few examples of, making a tea or a tincture. Most of the herbs that we were talking about could go in either form. So, do you need more specifics on like how to do those steps?
Margaret says no. Alexis asks, where is this recording located? Interested in how some herbs are different than in California.
Oh, right. Yeah. This is in Minnesota, so upper Midwest. So we definitely have a lot of different herbs and plants here. Although some of these have versions that will grow out in California, depending on, if you're up in the mountains more or down by the ocean more, that's going to make a difference.
And Susan asks, how is motherwort prepared to help with hot flashes?
Motherwort helps in that regard when the person is also having those kind of racing heart symptoms, it's not necessarily just for the hot flash, you know, sweating piece. It's helping to help calm that heart down that's flushing and triggering that circulation.
Michelle wants to know that last plant, was it yellow dock, D-O-C-K?
Yes, yes. Rumex crispus is its Latin name.
If you can remember that. And then someone else asked, can you please talk about the German chamomile? It looks like a few different plants and I can't tell them apart.
It does look a lot like, there are some really similar feathery looking plants like that. So that's a good reminder to always, as we're learning, and even sometimes if we're just in a different area, like if I was in California, I would be looking at my plant apps, I would be getting my books out. You want to look at 3 different resources so that you can cross-reference and make sure that you're looking at the right plant. And taking some basic botany classes can be really helpful. Matthew Wood has on his institute a class that he co-teaches with another person called Botany for Herbalists, and it's really simple and basic. And there's a book called Botany in a Day that is also a really good beginner book. So,
Cool. Margaret also asks, where do you cut the herbs, like peppermint? Maybe such as.
Yeah, you can, well, for most of the mints, and actually in one of the other segments, there's a few different kinds of mints as well, but you can take, the whole top part of the plant. You can wait till they're flowering and get a little bit more of that flower and that color into your tea blend, which is kind of pretty and nice. You can also, like particularly with mints, you can give them a haircut several times through the season and just they'll grow back and bush out, and then you just can keep trimming them and cutting them more. I like to hang my mints, and a lot of the herbs that are mint family plants, or like the yarrow, things that aren't going to just fall apart as they're drying, I will bundle them and hang them up instead of putting them on a screen. They seem to dry a little bit happier that way. One thing about doing that is you need to make sure that they're really thoroughly dry. At some point, I will oftentimes have to strip them from the stem and then just let the leafy part dry a little bit longer on a screen. Another thing you can do for that is just get a paper bag. If you don't have a lot of space for screens and hanging up things, is get a paper bag and stick the herb in it upside down, just kind of spread out so you can get air moving around in there, and every day just kind of go and toss them around a little bit, and then as they're drying and like the seeds are falling off or the flowers are falling apart, then it's all contained in the bag for you.
Great idea. That's all the questions we have in the chat at the moment.
Okay, I have a question. When I was sharing the screen earlier, could you still see my Zoom video face, or did it go cover your whole screen?
I could still see the videos on the side, so that I could see just the participants off to the right.
Okay.
I think you were the only one with your video on.
That was so weird. Okay, I love technology. Shall we go back to look at another one? Let's see. My computer is being slow. Share screen. There we go. Need to do. Let's try this one. Oh, disclaimer. She couldn't get the she couldn't get the camera to turn right side up for some reason for this segment, but it's not that long. It's just a couple of minutes here. So apologize for that. Whoops. Nope. There we go.
Did you already start sharing the video? I'm not seeing it.
You're not seeing it?
Mm-mm.
All right, let's start again.
It doesn't look like you're sharing your screen right now.
All right, let me try again here. Okay. Oh boy, I'm so sorry.
Now I can see your screen.
But I can't. Okay, let's try this again. My video player went away. All right. So here we have some violets. No, we just have a couple of late bloomers, thank goodness. Did we do this one? So this is a subspecies of violet. All violets, Johnny jump ups, the kind of pansies that you buy at the greenhouse, they're all interchangeable. They all have varying degrees of these properties, but violets are sweet. Look at the shape. Can we think about the doctrine of signatures there? You see the heart? So good for our heart. Good for our heart physically, good for our heart energetically. Flower essence of violet is called heart's ease. And it can be used when someone's heart needs some help with grief or loss or things like that. And it's a very gentle and wonderful flower essence. It is a moistening lymphatic. So this particular herb is used a lot in remedies that people are needing to have support for their lymph system, and in certain kinds of cancers, like breast cancer, which is a lot about the lymphatics. It's used in formulas in that way, and as a single herb. It's a really tasty salad herb, and it's a very mucilaginous, and it's a really light, lovely, sweet green leaf you can add to your springtime vegetables. The flowers, if you put one in your mouth, it's like so moistening and so soothing and coating, like for a sore throat or a hoarse voice. It's a great thing to just chew on and or make tea out of. So a very lovely little flower. I let them grow wherever they want and try not to step on them. They get free reign. And one of the troubles with a lot of these perennials is that they want to take over the whole garden, and the violets, they get a shot at that.
Do you want to do the bee balm?
Bee balm, yeah. This is Monarda fistulosa. This is probably one of the more versatile herbs. It's got this It doesn't really make you sneeze. We've got some chickweed under here. It is also a mint family plant. Gets this big, beautiful, the wild bee balm, or the Monarda officiosa, has a very light, like this color, purple flower on the top. This like poof of flower on top. Cultivated varieties, they come in all different shades of red and purples and blues, and they have similar properties. But when we're talking about the fistulosa, that's the one that has come down through the years as the medicine plant. It grows in usually more of a drier ground, and more hot. It can tolerate some pretty poor soil and grow pretty happily there. It's oily. It has a lot of volatile oils. It's got a really almost like between oregano and I don't know, like almost like really good soap smell. It's antiviral, it's antimicrobial, it's antifungal. This is one of the plants that, in the end of summer where you see they get that gray, sort of dusty mold looking on the leaves when it gets too hot at the end of summer. That's one of the signatures that says, I'm good for fungus, for mold. And this one for bladder infection, kidney infection, I learned from my mentor, Margie Flint. So it's superb for helping with UTIs. So you just drink tea out of it, and you just wash that through and coat that whole urinary system, and it works like a charm in not very long. A few days. Usually I'll give people dried herb to make tea, and then also give them a tincture to also take to really get that medicine into the system. Monarda can also be used as an antiviral for things like lung infection, respiratory issues. It's being used a little bit more widely now since the pandemic for those kinds of immune system cold symptoms and viruses. So it's got a lot of versatility in what it does. It's great topically for treating burns. It's one of the Native American Ojibwe teachings of using this topically in a salve or just as an infusion to treat burns. So anyway, it smells lovely, and the bees do love it. It's a great one for pollinators in your yard. Okay, let's finally go back and find the nettles. All right. Okay, back for a second. Any questions?
There are currently no questions in the chat, but if someone wants to add, oh, no, Michelle says, what was the name of that last plant?
Monarda fistulosa. So it's called bee balm. That's a common name. It's also sometimes called sweet leaf.
And that's bee balm, Beeebalm. Do you use the petals or leaves?
You use the leaves and the flowers. So you can pick, and it grows, it'll get like one primary stem up, and then like these little ones that grow off to the side. So typically, what I do is I try and leave that center one and cut the little ones off as they're growing. And they'll grow, a first batch of flowers, and then some more will come later. So you can just kind of keep picking it for a period of time, a couple of weeks as it's blooming, and gather quite a bit. It's not a very easy one to find in Commerce. And so if you can get your own patches started or find them out in the wild, it's a good one to make sure you gather enough of.
And if anyone wants to actually ask a question by unmuting themselves, they're welcome to do it that way too. But if you'd rather put it in the chat, you can do that.
Okay, should we try one more? Now,
Hey, quick question for you. This is Margaret.
okay.
What is the bee balm used for? I apparently have a lot of it that appeared again in my yard.
Okay. Well, all right, let me close this for a second. It's an antiviral, an antifungal. It's got, it's drying. So if there's inflammation, that is because there's too much hot damp. That's what it helps to balance out. So things like, again, bladder infections, lung infections, anything that is a hot damp. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Good. You know, chickweed, I saw it growing there, and it grows in the backyard too, but that was one of the ones that just kind of, there was just so many plants. We ran out of time. So do you have questions about the chickweed?
Just, its uses and its properties.
Okay. The chickweed is another really yummy one to eat. It's very succulent and juicy, and it gives great texture, to a salad or something like that. It's very mucilaginous. You think about how it grows, it's long and stringy, so that's another sign of that it could be helpful to the lymphatic system. So it's a lymphatic. It's great for healing dry because it is so juicy and succulent. It's great for, like, you can use it in a smoothie, and it's so mucilaginous it kind of works as a thickener. And so that's another good way to put it, in your body as food. It'll grow, it grows through 2 flowering times. So you want to try and get it in between when it's flowering so that it will keep coming back. That makes sense? Okay. All right. I'm going to try and share one more here before we run out of time. I got another little 5-minute one here. See if I can do this with more finesse. Let's try this one. So we finally made it back to some of the nettles. These nettles I've already picked once, and they're growing back. This is Urtica dioicea, and it's very stingy. You can see the little hairs on the stem. That's where the sting is stored. There's something in there called formic acid. It's actually the same thing that's in biting ants that bite that make you itch. That's the same kind of acid that's in there. Nettles is an adaptogen, so it's a tonic for your whole system, and it helps across the board with just helping to regulate and harmonize all of your body systems to get them into balance. The reason that it works so well with allergies in the spring is because of this actual formic acid, and that's a piece that we want to save when we're harvesting the nettles, because after about 20 minutes the sting actually goes out of the plant. And when that breaks down, then the plant that stung you actually becomes the one that will soothe you, and it turns into its own cure. So if you get stung by nettles, you need to take the offender and let it sit for maybe 20 minutes or half an hour until it doesn't have that sting to it anymore. Then you can crush it up, or make an infusion out of it and put it on the sting bites, and it will help them to go away and stop burning. So the formic acid is what helps us with the allergies, because it works on the protein pathway in our body that triggers the immune response. And what it does is it helps to keep it from being so reactive. It kind of raises your trigger threshold, and it breaks down those proteins that our body doesn't, that's responding to in a negative way, and helps to normalize that. So a good one to look for, and there's a few different kinds of nettles as well. Wood nettle has more of a round leaf. It's not quite as pointy, and that can be used the same way too. So right next to our nettles, we have some lovely orange mint growing. This is, and here's a wild mint. All right.
Nope.
So here we have some violets.
Let's see. I think it's this one.
So we just have a lot of mint that's kind of growing around. A couple different varieties. This is an orange mint. That one's not a wild version, but that one is super tasty. It's probably one of my favorite mints in the whole wide world. And it makes a really nice tea, and it's a really good addition to any of your other tea blends. It has just a beautiful mild taste. And over here we have another mint that is a wild mint. That just came to be a volunteer in the yard one year and grows, and this one is more hot, more stimulating, more active, and also more hardy probably. So lots of mint family plants. Here's another one. This is blue vervain. Blue vervain is a nervine that we use for calming the nervous system, emotionally and also physically. This works on physical nerves, and it's good for someone that has problems with their neck, the nerves in their neck. So this gets really, really tall, and then it gets this spiky, almost like an antler looking bunch of flowers on the top. It's these spears, and that it gets a little top heavy at that point. And so a lot of times then the plant will droop down, which helps us remember that this might be good for someone with some neck issues. And it's very rigid looking at first before it droops over. So it's that if someone's having stiff neck problems or having trouble seeing the other side of things, sometimes blue vervain can be the herb that is going to help them. So what do we have here? Baptisia. This is wild blue indigo. This gets to be a big giant bush about this big, and the darkest purple flowers that you can imagine. Is just beautiful. And that deep dark purple, you can see the purple in the vein too, or in the stem. So this is about, remember when we talked about colors, we talked about how purple is stagnation and deep, like things not moving. And so Baptisia is used for like really deep, long-standing, like stuck infection. It's a really, it's a stronger one. I don't always just give this one out right away, but if for somebody that's had something and it just hasn't quite cleared their system all the way, Matthew Wood says, try Baptisia for someone if you're asking them questions, and he says never been well since mono. So like Epstein-Barr and things like that are this more systemic, low grade. Um, he suggests trying Baptisian. I've had it work for a couple of people with just exactly that symptom. So. I wonder how much time we've been doing this for. We have marshmallow root coming up here. Marshmallow is sweet and soft and moistening, and it's a great mucous membrane herb. It helps our lymphatic system. This is a cousin of a hollyhock. It's going to get very tall. It's going to have beautiful little floppy flowers that looks very similar to a tiny hollyhock. You can use the leaves, you can use the flowers, and we use the root. So all parts of the plant. The leaves and the flowers are a little less mucilaginous, but they're real gentle, and they are great to make tea out of or topical skin soothers. And then the root is much more mucilaginous, and we use that when we need a little bit deeper lubrication. So that's a good one. There's all kinds of wild mallows out growing along the edges of sort of more wet trails and things like that. So it's a good one to look for. Stop. Okay. I do have one other section about St. John's wort, but it's almost 7 here, so maybe we can just kind of wrap things up with some more questions. Anybody has any?
Susan asks, does the nervine have another name?
The blue vervain, the last one we talked about. Yes. Yeah. Its Latin name is Verbena hastata. I wish you all could see how much the garden has changed in just 2 weeks. We had such a slow spring here. All of those plants now are just coming into bloom, and there's color everywhere. And so I look forward to showing the progression of our plant friends when we gather next month.
We've got a couple more questions. Michelle says, what was the wildwood plant named?
Wildwood plant. Oh, the mallows, the different mallows. So marshmallow root is what we were looking at. And it's part of a family of plants called mallow plants. And there's just a bunch of different species of mallow plants that have similar properties. They're mucilaginous, they're moistening, all of those properties.
Kay says, I have a red bee balm. Did you say that a violet color is better medicinally?
The violet one is the fistulosa, and the red one is probably a species called Monarda didyma, which is it's a cultivar. It's a cousin. Didyma is got a little bit different properties in terms of the oiliness and the heat part of it, but can be used. Again, make sure if you're using cultivars that you're getting things that are as organic as possible. Know what people are, know the greenhouse that you're getting your plants from and that sort of thing.
And then Susan, who had asked about the Verbena asked, would that be good for degenerative disc disease?
It would probably maybe help with the nerve pain a little bit if that's going on. For degenerative discs, a good combination, which I have a topical I call Disc Ease, and it's for discs and bursas, and it's based on a recipe, if you will, from Matthew Wood, when he's talking about using mullein for helping with the spine. Because when you look at a mullein plant, we'll have to get that one next time. The stalk of it, when it's a mature plant, looks like a spine. And then the herb that pairs with that to help the disc sac itself is golden seal. And it can help with strengthening the bursa or the sac of the disc. And so the mullein helps with moving the fluid and getting the that back in the right place, because it's a lymphatic in that way. And then the golden seal helps with strengthening. And then I also put St. John's wort and Solomon seal in there, because those also help those kinds of tissues. And I thought I saw someone ask about the baptisia. So wild indigo or blue indigo was the one for the long-standing insidious infection.
Charlene says, my herb garden is being consumed by tansy. How do I get rid of it?
Pull it, pull it, and pull it, and pull it. One thing about tansy, if you're in an area where there's a lot of deer, they don't really like it. So some people actually pull that tansy up and like pulverize it and use it, sprinkle it along the edges, and that smell or whatever, I'm not sure if the smell or the oils or whatever, help to keep the deer and the bunnies outside the garden. And some people just plant it right around the edge of their garden and just try and keep it there. But that can be a challenge.
She also asks, what's the best herb for chronic pain?
Well, there's so many variables there. What's the pain from? What's the constitution? All of those things that would require a little bit more talking about. Lots of these topicals, though, that are good for, connective tissue, like Solomon seal, like mullein, like St. John's wort, like comfrey. All of those help with soft tissue and connective tissue things. So if it's that kind of pain, those are good ones to think about. Arnica. There's so many other variables there, though, diet, nutrition, and stress, and lots of layers.
Hi.
Hi, Lila.
You mentioned ladies' mantle, which is something I grow. I just love. I grow it for the foliage. But when it starts to bloom, do you use that? Could you say a little bit more about the ladies' mantle?
Actually, you pick the leaves before the plant flowers, and it's the leaves that and they're really easy to dry. That's an easy herb to harvest and dry and use. So, and to tincture the leaves fresh if you're going to tincture them. And then a good way to, if you want to use it like as a toner for your face, do it in witch hazel, because then it will just even be more tonifying and lovely, and preserve it for longer. And as a rinse, just as a rinse. One thing that I tell people to do is like make a bunch of tea and then freeze it in an ice cube tray. And then put the ice cubes in a bag, you know, and then every day when you want to go and do your face care, you just take the ice cube out and let it melt. And then there's just enough for you to use on your face.
Oh, thank you.
And that's a good trick for, you know, some of these things too that you might use as a like a wound healer, like for a compress or something like that. And if you're looking to freeze some bigger, like I need this for my emergency first aid sometime, use a muffin cup, a muffin tin, because that's about a half a cup of liquid when it's melted. And that's usually a pretty nice amount for if you're gonna, you know, poultice a scrape or something like that. Or I mean, compress a scrape.
Maggie says, is this lady's mantle?
I wasn't sure what you were discussing. I didn't catch the herb.
Yeah, it was the lady's mantle. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I hadn't heard of it before, so that's a new one for me to research.
It's got a really pretty yellow, airy, lacy looking flower that sticks up above that green thickness. And it stays in bloom for a really long time.
It does.
Yeah, it's a really good anchoring plant in the garden because it just keeps that big round shape.
Yes, it's very neat. It's beautiful. I just love it. It's a double bonus that it could be used cosmetically or for
Yeah.
the skin. Yeah.
And for down there, don't forget about those uses.
Oh,
Charlene wants to
Thank you.
know, do you have any recommendations for using oregano?
Just oregano like from the kitchen, or are you talking about wild oregano or
I have
oregano?
a plant. I have a big bushy plant outside that just keeps growing like crazy, and it's kind of taking over. So I know I need to prune it back and do something with it besides just my, you know, my pizza and pasta sauce.
Yeah. So it's a cousin of bee balm, actually. So it's a mint family plant, right? So we think about the volatile oils, and if you think about the way it tastes and feels in your body, both the plant constitution. So it's more warming, it's more oily, it's a little bit more like thyme than it is like spearmint, for instance. So thinking about those kinds of mucous membrane needs, sore throats, infuse it into honey, make an oxymel, which is a honey and vinegar together blend. And that's great for, you know, you can take it on a spoon in the wintertime or put it into your tea. You can use it in the bathtub. It's got a lot of it, and you have a tub and you're a tub taker. Make a big pot of like decoction, so really, really strong infusion, and then dump that in your bathtub and take a bath with it, and it's good for sore muscles. Those are some of the things that I would do with it. Make a foot soak. So volatile oils, so antimicrobial, you know, think about your cold remedies.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We've got about 2 minutes left here. Anything else?
Can you talk about rosemary tincture? I'm drying some and going to try to make a tincture. Can you talk about using 100 proof for the tincture?
Oh, you know what? For most herbs, you just need to use regular strength vodka, or if you prefer the flavor of brandy. A lot of people will tincture in brandy. I like to use vodka. I think it has a cleaner profile, I guess. The flavor is less noticeable. I think if you haven't dried it out too much, I would definitely do it fresh. Try and tincture as many of your herbs fresh if you can. It makes a nice way to do it, and pulls out different properties. Sometimes then after you've dried things, especially oily plants or very aromatic plants, you're going to lose some of that when they dry. So that would be a good one to do fresh. And another thing you could do with that is it works really good for, rosemary is good for headaches. It's good for getting you alert. So if you have enough to actually keep it drying, it's a great tea. It's a great afternoon tea if you need that pick-me-up to get through the rest of the day and you don't want to do caffeine or something like that. You can just sip on a little bit of rosemary tea and it will help perk you back up and make your brain more clear again.
Any more questions? Getting a few thank yous in the chat.
Well, thank you all. Good questions. And, thanks for putting up with my amateur screen sharing. You'd think I'd be getting better at this by now. Anyway, appreciate your patience.
I do want to say that since this is recorded, we are going to add it to the YouTube, our Whole Foods Co-op YouTube channel, once we have it ready. In case you maybe didn't get everything and want to rewatch it, I'm going to add the link to that again so that if some of you missed it, you can be sure to get that.
Great. Thanks for doing that, Erica.
Yeah. And there is going to be one more class in this series that we have planned.
Yep. I think it's July 26th, was it?
July 26th.
Okay.
And if anyone wants to register, you can do that at Whole Foods Co-op website. And I will add that to the chat as well. It's wholefoods.coop/classes. You can go on and register. And if you have any questions after the class, you're welcome to email us at the co-op or email Stacy.
Yes.
And I will also add those email addresses in the chat.
Thank you. We'll probably have the video available, in the next couple of days. It takes a while to convert it and send it along. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Stacy, for sharing all of that. This has been I've certainly learned a lot. We look forward to the next class and hearing more from you. And thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.